Welcome to the webinar for Addiction Prevention Coalition. My name is John Steakley and want to thank Addiction Prevention Coalition for this opportunity to share with you guys. We're going to have some resources and contact info that we'll share with you in just a little bit. And also, we will post this on the website and social media account afterwards. So if you miss a part of it or want to come back and see what we learned from Latrice, then you are welcome to do that at a later point. My name is John Steakley. I'm the Executive Director at Unbound Grace Ministries, and we work with individuals and families that are struggling with different addiction issues, substance issues. But our guest star expert with us today is Latrice Dailey. She's with UAB's Beacon program and focuses her counseling on teens. So Latrice, say hello to us. And
Hey everyone, it's my pleasure to be here and talk to you guys today about being the compass and talking to your teens about substance abuse. So thank you.
Nice. Thanks, Latrice. I want to run through the outline of what we're going to do real quick. So the purpose of the webinar is really to equip the parents to better understand what their teen might be going through, and then learn some of the things that has been helpful with Latrice as she's had the opportunity to counsel teens and parents as they've tried to figure out how to navigate the confusing, frustrating world of substance issues. We also want to encourage you guys to ask questions, to interact with us. We feel like it'll be a lot more practical if you guys throw in some input. And also, at the end, we'll do a brief summary of what we talked about. But our goal today really is to equip you as parents to give your teen a compass when it comes to drugs and alcohol. We hope to encourage you and interact with you again during this webinar. So during our time together, we're going to discuss what it looks like to help your teen have a plan and clear boundaries when it comes to resisting the temptation of drugs and alcohol. And then we want to work through two case studies with you. And Latrice is going to kind of break them down and talk about how she might handle these different situations. And then if we have time, then we'll have a period where we can interact with your questions. But we want y'all to ask questions throughout this conversation. So Latrice helped APC come out with an article that talks about, well, the title was Riding Out the Storm of Teen Drug and Alcohol Use. And it was really just an article that shared a lot of Latrice's thoughts and kind of broke down how to create clear boundaries, how to communicate with parents. And she just has a lot of insight that she's able to share with us. So Latrice, what are, in your opinion, some of the key areas that you think needs to be included in a conversation where a parent addresses substance or alcohol with a teen?
Beyond key factors, one of the things is just keeping the conversation open, practicing empathy. And a lot of people may think that that's a big word and only counselors can do that. And so the biggest way that I know how to navigate this, or for parents to practice this, is not looking at the behavior. So even if it's an adverse behavior, something that you see as offensive or defiant, when you're looking at that behavior, try to think of the need behind that behavior. And I learned this from working with kids with autism, because sometimes their behavior would be seen as defiant, inappropriate, but what I learned is that that's their way of communicating with me. And through that behavior, even though adverse to me, inappropriate, it was their language. They were telling me that they needed something. So in talking about teenagers, guys, remember they're navigating through a lot of emotional, mental, developmental changes. And given our current state, societal changes. So if they're navigating through all of these changes, it's not going to be a black and white picture. Their communication, and even then they're learning how to articulate, how to navigate their emotions. So when you're having a conversation with teens, or the most vital thing, the vital factor I could think of is practicing empathy. Don't look at the behavior. Try to think of what they could be communicating through you to you behind the behavior, what the need is. So practicing empathy.
Wow, that's good. And I want to kind of get back on empathy here in just a second, because I think that's incredibly important and insightful. So you're a parent, you need to initiate that conversation with your teen about the substance or alcohol issues. What are some of the things, just basic information that you feel like you need to hit on, like, maybe even the different types of drugs and alcohol?
Okay, so what I find is that most times my teens are well educated, right? So in the blog before, I said that parents need to be the compass for their kid. And when I use the word compass, a compass is a guide, it's a navigation to get to a geographical location, right? So when we think about parenting, there's a certain place, it's a certain outcome that we want our kids to achieve. And so when we're talking about specific points, as far as when we're having this conversation, what you want to hit, you want to give them a how-to guide, like a how-to guide to approach crises, high-risk situations, so that they can have tools before they're in that situation on how to handle it. So it's as simple as, one, telling your kid and providing reassurance that it's okay. I know that at your age, you may be exposed to drinking. You may be exposed to marijuana. You may be exposed to pill parties. I want us to navigate that. So one of the things that you may get as a parent when you're talking about pretty much quote unquote things that they don't want to talk about with their parents, because honestly, guys, they can have this conversation with their peers. They can find out these things online, through media, through movies. So that's what I'm saying. You want to be the sounding board and compass to initiate ongoing conversations all the time, and providing an open environment where when these situations come up, they can talk to you. So when we talk about perfect timing, and I sent some resources that'll be handed out later, over the dinner table, on the ride to school, because guys, most of the time, your kids are being exposed to these situations outside of your home. So it's when they're going to school, it's at the bus stop, it's at the mall, it's when they're at a friend's house. That's the perfect time on the way to provide reassurance and a guide to, hey, if you encounter this situation, I want you to know that it's okay. You can call mom, I'll come back and pick you up. I want you to know that possibly, you may experience some social rejection because you're not fitting into what your environment is doing around you. So then at that point, empower your child to know that they can be the minority in the situation, that you can be the leader, that it's okay not to go along with the crowd. I think one of the biggest things when we're talking about substance use is empowering your child to lead, empowering your child to be confident, so that if they are the minority, when they encounter social opposition because they're not using drugs because they're not doing what everyone else is doing, they will confidently maneuver through that situation without giving in to the temptation of drugs.
That's strong. I love the empower them to be able to navigate that situation, and the reality that they're probably not the only one that's struggling with what do I do here.
Yes.
There's a safety in having a plan in place, and that communication. I think it's important what you said. They're going to see substance abuse movies in the media, all these different areas. And you have the opportunity as a parent to be able to communicate to them a true picture of what it looks like to navigate substance abuse more safely.
So one of the reasons, I'm sorry, Jen.
No, please.
Why you want to have this ongoing conversation with them is because if they're in this situation, they're going to be emotion and feelings driven to do what feels good, that urge. Okay, so now if you have this ongoing conversation with them prior to encountering this situation, what you're going to avoid is the impulsivity to just go with the trend. what you're going to allow for them to do, which is hard for adolescents, is to have already pre-thought out what to do when I'm in this situation, right? And even with the reassurance, so maybe they don't remember the plan that you told them. Maybe they don't remember what you have told them to say when they encounter those situations, but they will remember that you said, hey, it's okay, you can call me, or hey, it's okay not to go with the trends. You know, if you're having this ongoing conversation with them, I think you're gonna really cut down on the impulsivity to for the adolescent to give into those emotions that they may feel in the moment, as well as that pressure.
That's good. What about communicating consequences beforehand? The parent expressing some of the consequences that might result from different kind of use.
Oh, that is a big one. All right. So one of the things that I love about behavior in general is that most times, guys, it's natural consequences for behaviors, right? So while we can have a conversation with our kids about what the consequences will be, I think it's also important, more so than talking about a punishment or like house rules, what the natural progressive consequences could be possibly if you use drugs, right? And I think, again, you know, one of the things that I thought about my adolescents, they know a lot about drugs, right? So I'm telling you, if you want to touch that ground, be ready for a thesis, you know, because again, all this information is online. And so when you're talking about consequences, I would say give options. Allow those consequences when it comes to your house and what you're going to do as a parent if this happens for the team to be included, guys, because most times when we send all of the defiance, it's because they want to have a voice. And so even in keeping the conversation open, you want to provoke their opinions on drug use. You want to provoke their thoughts on what will happen if you use drugs. What is it that you're curious about? I mean, and if they have used drugs, well, what was it that you liked about that? And you want to provoke those opinions because, again, that will allow you to validate their feelings, but it's also going to allow you to see more of what interventions, what solutions, what resources, what's the need that your child is seeking out drug use. And so one of the things that in talking about coming up with a consequence, I would say when we're talking about pre-drug use, talk more about the natural consequences. You know, one of the things that I like to talk to families about is identifying and addressing if it's a predisposition for addiction in your family. You know, allowing your child to see real life experiences within the family so that they know that, you know, this is what is happening to Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam tried this when he was younger. And to also, you know, keep the dialogue open to see what he sees, because a lot of times for us as the adult, we see the negative consequences, but you may see that your child may not see Uncle Sam as having an addiction. He may see him as the thrill-seeking, fun-seeking uncle. And he could be curious about that. And so even in that, you want to keep the dialogue open, but also talk to them about how to seek that thrill appropriately and more positive ways beyond drugs to have that. And so I think, did I answer your question, John?
Yeah, consequences. This is good. Yeah.
So pre-drug use, talk about natural consequences. The reason why I'm saying natural consequences is because you don't want to set a consequence that will close the conversation and the dialogue with your child because you set a punishment, a consequence, right? That can I feel like setting a consequence could possibly create some mistrust. So I would say before pre-drug use, right, talk more about what the natural consequences are. All right. And then if it has been some drug use, right, if you suspect it, you know for sure, talk about with your child what the boundaries is going to be. What, maybe in-home drug testing, maybe limiting certain friends. But when you're coming up with that consequence, it's important to identify what your child values, but also to have the child be part of that consequence. All right, so when we're talking about this from a behavior standpoint, beyond the consequence, help your child identify what the reward would be if I don't go back. Because we talk a lot about negative consequences, and kids are more driven by rewards, right? What's the positives? If I don't go back, if I don't use drugs again, this will happen. I think it's even highlight that as part of your consequence conversation with your child.
Absolutely. That's encouraging to hear. And I'll add, from my perspective, as a parent, if you're going to set a specific consequence that might feel like punishment, be willing to do that. Think through, is that something you really want to do? If you don't do it, then they begin not to trust what you say, and that makes it that much harder to have open, candid conversations in the future. If you suspect or have caught your teen using, Latrice, what do you feel like the best course of action is, in your opinion?
Okay, so first, guys, you're not gonna like this, right? Because I want to say to you as parents, the first thing, and I know, guys, because I get this all the time. I promise, I'm equally compassionate. I equally worry about my clients, just in the given height of what things are going on. And even when I find out that they use or return to use, something in you, the adult you, rises up, right? Those emotions, those feelings, those concerns. The initial swallow those emotions, all right? And think about how you want to address it. Think about how you want to control your emotions, right? Because the reason I'm saying control your emotions is because, guys, my dog is right here, like fighting on me. The reason why you want to control your emotions is because your emotions could shut down the conversation, right? And again, when we're talking about effective communication, your emotions will overpower what you're trying to say to your kids. So the first thing is swallow what comes up impulsively as an adult. The other thing is, I would say timing is everything. All right, so at the onset of finding out that your child is using drugs, I would say you want to talk to your partner about what next steps are. You want to talk to your partner, or even, I would say also bring in the person, if you don't have a partner or companion, bring in a person that is your kid's person. All right, this is the person that naturally has a rapport with your kid. It can be a coach, it can be a mentor, right? They naturally have a rapport, right? Because if you bring that person in, I feel like most times the boundary is already going to be down, right? All right, so I will also say, don't talk about it at the onset of the event. When I say this, I mean if your kid has not overdosed, right? Because there's certain situations where if your kid is in crises, yes, take your kid to the hospital immediately, all right? But if you found some things, your kid is up walking around, I would say you want to provide a positive time to talk to your kid, not at the onset of finding something, or they've been put out of school, not at the onset. You want to have that conversation be as positive and open. But if you do it at the onset when something happens, it's not going to be, because it's possibly going to be emotion driven. Mm-hmm. You come up with the perfect time. If you find out your kid is using drugs, again, I want you to have a conversation to identify, again, with empathy, perfect timing, and openness, right? And active listening. Listen for the need. What was it? Because then you're going to see, most times, guys, it's other mental health issues that may be playing a part. It could be some trauma underneath that, right? You're gonna validate your kids' emotions, what they feel, not the behavior. You definitely want to refrain from, reinforcing that they use, but you want to validate their feelings, all right? Then you want to provide reassurance that you are gonna be with them and navigate through this difficult time. That is difficult for you, and it may be difficult for them. And I think providing options, all right? So when I say providing options, I think providing options of, hey, this could be our next steps, right? Because you want your kid to be a part of, collaboratively work with you to work towards whatever the solution will be for you and your family. And I think, asking your kid, what do you think we should do about this? What do you think we should do next about this? And getting them involved and empowering them to be able to confidently seek out treatment. I think, I can hold your hand through this, but I think we should get a professional involved, right? So that could be referring them to UAB Beacon, that could be referring them to a mental health center, because even if it starts with mental health, 9 times out of 10, they're going to refer you to another substance abuse facility. And sometimes it's a collaborative effort to get to what the problem is. Mm-hmm. Y'all got to see my dog because she is biting me.
Yeah, introduce us.
Sit.
Oh, well, that's great. So, you talked a lot about setting up expectations for the teen, but what you're telling us is we need to set up expectations as the parent for ourselves.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, guys, because you're going to bring your child to my treatment facility, and I'm going to be with your child for 3 to 4 hours. Oh God, and this is so near and dear to my heart, but the child has to go back home to you. And so it's so important, which is what we do at Beacon, is we empower you to be the best support to your kid throughout this process. Because treatment, it doesn't stop when you drop your kid off and come to group. Treatment continues. It's in how you communicate with your child. It's also on what John said. It's how you set boundaries. It's how you follow through on what you say you're gonna do, but it's also too in how you provide reassurance and empower your kid to know that, hey, we can get through this. Hey, it's different alternatives. No, despite what you may be seeking drugs for, it's different alternatives that you can do to provoke this feeling, to get healing in this area. And no matter how long it takes, we're gonna help you navigate through it, because it's not, substance abuse, guys, is not a quick fix.
Absolutely. One of the hallmark signs of addiction is secrecy and lying. As a parent, how do you feel like they can address the teen when they feel like there's a lot of secrecy or a lot of lying without losing those guards?
I think from one is refraining from being accusatory, but also to provide, trust is one of those things that we have to build back up. And if your kid is lying somewhere, even with us, we've created possibly a mistrust, but also too, we've created some anxiety in coming to having those conversations or addressing certain issues. So I think one of the things as a parent is provide reassurance. Ongoing dialogue with your kid. I think, sometimes, and I find this in therapy, right? Sometimes it's all about the reframe, right? The kid is not defiant. No, he is determined, So the things that you would say negative, because even those negative things that we say, our kids are listening. And so when it's something negative, reframe it in a positive, right? Because then if you are able to do that, you're building confidence in your kid, but also too, you're keeping that trust open, right? Because sometimes what we're talking about when we're saying our kid is bad, or if we're addressing an issue, most times we're not talking about the kid, it's a behavior. So separating those two. And when building back up that trust, patience, creating a consistent time to actually spend time with your kid. And guys, they're teenagers. So I would say within reason, you may have to set up a house party call. Like, house party is a new act. So you may have to reach them at their level. You may have to sit down and play Call of Duty. You may have to sit through a card game. You may have to Zoom them, because guys, our kids is not the same as when we grew up. And I think, honestly, find something that they're interested in, and then you learn it. It's just like any other relationship. if you find their interest and you can get them, it'll be easy. One, if you're engaging them in an activity that they're interested about, even their music, guys. Sometimes I have my kids check in with their music, and it's adult in us, like listening to it, and it's like, oh my God, why did they say that? But if you listen to the music, I can guarantee you're gonna find out something about your kid, and then asking them instead of rejecting, asking them, well, what do you get out of this song? What do you like about this artist? Because those things, listening to the music that they listen to, watching some of the shows, you're gonna learn more about your kid through that. And so I think, in building trust, I would say one of those things that you can do is start by, keeping the relationship open despite opposition. Because guys, that's just a developmental thing. They're gonna push away. And I think as long as, you let them know that it's no limit that they can push you away to, that you're gonna keep coming back. They need that.
Mhm.
They need that reassurance. But you can create the trust by engaging in activities that they love, validating their feelings, and again, provoking confidence and nourishing, that within them.
That's good. It makes so much sense. We, as a parent, you want so badly to be able to openly communicate with your teen, except we're asking them to not only communicate with us, but do it on our level and
Yeah.
forsake all of the normal communication that you've had for so long. So that's really helpful.
I think it's going to start with that phone or some type of virtual device. So maybe sending a text message. Our kids are we're in an age where everything is virtual, where everything is online. So face to face contact, I think even for their generation, is a little intimidating. So inviting them to a house party, and house party, guys, is an app where honestly it's just like Zoom, but it's an app where like you can engage and talk. And I think like doing something fun like that, because that's more on them. Sending them a snap. They love snap. So again, just engaging with them on their level.
I think that's great. One of the things that I've enjoyed with some of the people I've been able to work with, if it's a teenage boy, if I come across something funny, a meme or, whatever, a TikTok, I love seeing it and having a little bit of funny dialogue with that to know, like, I'm human too. And
Yes.
it's just, it creates a better level of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are some of the different reasons that you have heard teens express drug use? Like why they're taking different substances, even to some of the extremes.
Sometimes for fun, mostly, I think that's the biggest one I hear is for fun. Sometimes for the trip, for the detachment. All right. So remember I told you guys that adolescents are emotionally developing. I think we negate how difficult it is to navigate our emotions, even as adults. So imagine encountering new emotions, of apathy, of disappointment, of indifference as an adolescent, and not really knowing how to articulate hurt, grief. I think that it's hard for adolescents to articulate that. And I think most of the time, the most common thing beyond fun is just to numb my emotions, just to not feel anything. And I would say underneath that, even if they say, Miss Latrice, I just used to have fun, most of the time, even under the recreational use, is some sort of an escape, but also maybe some type of trauma. And even when it's fun, sometimes it's mental health issues that are lying underneath. Anxiety is one of the main things that I've seen as of late. Some anxiety, using in social settings and social scenes because of anxiety.
I think that's great. And, from my perspective, I think that's an opportunity for parents to have that conversation with the teen, and then to say, hey, this might be an opportunity to sit down with someone like Latrice and just dig a little deeper into that conversation, not as an issue, as a problem, but as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great.
And I think framing it that way, John, is a great way to keep the conversation open.
Mm-hmm. And I think for the parents, it says, hey, I'm for you. I'm for your health and your success. You know, let's invest in this. I think that's great. Well, I vote, Latrice, that we skip the case studies.
Okay.
And do a couple more questions, and then
yes, I would love that.
Yeah, if APC wants us to come back and do that, we can talk about it at a later time.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess really a couple more questions. So at what point do you think the parent needs to reach out to someone like you? And I know we kind of touched on that a second ago.
I would say possibly as early as possible. So even at the onset of an event, so that should be part of the conversation, is getting a professional involved, like myself or a mental health professional, so that you can get an assessment. All right. And also, in having that conversation about seeking help, empowering them to let them know that that's the most courageous thing that they can do. And also letting them know that it'll be beneficial. So I think at the, not when it happens, but after you've had that conversation, because most times we may get kids that had no idea, and it's okay if you want us to start that conversation, but we will get kids that have no idea. Ms. Latrice, I had no idea I was coming here today. So they're mad when they get to me. That's okay. I'm ready for the opposition, you know. And even when I encounter that, I'm like, oh, it's a bummer. No one told you today, but it's okay. We're gonna make the best of this. So, you know, I want to know. I've learned more about them when that happens. But I would say as soon as possible, you know, not just for your kid, but also for yourself, because parents, even if it's just use, even if it's recreational, even if it hasn't progressed to the point of addiction, you can intervene. Intervention is going to be beneficial at any level. So one, having them come in and get an assessment will tell you more about their substance use, but it'll also tell us more about what the intervention needs to look like. And if it's not, we can point you to different resources. So I would say after you've had that conversation with your kid, then coming, if it's a crisis, right, where your kid has overdosed, 9 times out of 10, the hospital will contact us. That's going to be their follow-up care, is to get them hooked up with a substance abuse facility. So we'll be contacted that way as well.
Yeah. And, you know, to reiterate what Latrice said earlier, let us be a part of that plan. And you know, a positive consequence really is the opportunity to sit down with a safe third party that is their advocate in trying to figure out what health looks like for them. And, you know, if we're any good at what we do, then we're going to be able to bring down some of those walls and let them know it's a safe place for a healthy conversation. But, you know, if you make counseling out to be a punishment, then that creates a negative mindset that we can overcome, but it doesn't have to be there in the first place. We really are an assistant to the parent in helping raise the teen to be an adult that's able to function in life and give back. Another question, just kind of practically speaking, if someone does decide they want to bring their teen in, what does it look like? What are some of the, you know, they come in, they meet with you. What does your interaction look like with the teen, and then your interaction with the parent, just to kind of paint a picture?
So when you come into our office, both the parent and the kid is addressed. So our interactions first look like, one, providing reassurance to that parent, because most times too, the parents have anxiety about bringing that kid into the office. We also have a family program coordinator on staff. We also have some peer involvement with our adolescents currently. That was something we just did given COVID. And so we'll talk to the parent and get any information that we need from them, provide, you know, regarding insurance. But then mainly we bring the client back, and I'm going to interact with the child to do that assessment. And then after that assessment, you know, I talked to the child about what the diagnosis was, what the interventions for treatment. Most times I try to empower, I bring the parent in, but I try to empower the child to talk to the parent about what has come from that assessment. Like, what did you get from what I said? And then I talk to them collectively to talk about what the course of treatment looks like for both of them. Because if they come to UAB Beacon, we have 3 family tier classes that we recommend. And so we recommend the first one to all of our parents, which just kind of tells the parent about how to be the best support to the child while they're in treatment. And it focuses a lot on building the parent-child relationship as well as communication. And then the client will come and do services with us, myself, and we have another counselor on staff. So
good. That's good.
And our atmosphere is a fun atmosphere. So if you come into our facility, it is geared towards adolescents, right? So it's video gaming there. It's a quiet room there, which our girls love. It's board games there. It's a TV there. And it's also a space too for adults to hang out in like a formal lobby, but it's very adolescent friendly. So all of our things, everything in our establishment is catered to comforting the adolescents so that this feels like home, so that this feels like a safe place to them.
Nice. All right, last question. And then Carrie, if you have any questions for us, we'll start to address those. So kind of talking a little bit about identity, and you talked about some of the turmoil that goes on developmentally in the mind of a teen. I've worked a lot with some younger teens that feel like they've taken on this identity of I'm the partier, or I'm the one that always has the stuff for the week or the weekend. Speak a little bit about teen substance abuse and identity and some of what we can do to help empower a more true identity.
Oh man, John, this is so big. I feel like this takes another webinar. So one of the things that our adolescents, they're doing is that they are navigating through that question, who am I? Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, one of the main things that I try to empower my adolescents that I work with is in navigating who am I, right? It's okay, when you have put your who am I into something that changes, right? Because you may be the party girl now, but 17 years from now, those are things that can change. And so navigating them to find something that is more fixed, more solid, but also too that comes from them, right? Not outside of them, right? I know that people say that you are social butterfly. I know that people say that you are defiant, right? But when you are putting your who am I or I am, the word behind that, is that naturally your voice? Is that naturally who you see yourself as? And exploring the depth and the means for them to explore, where is that really coming from? And is that really who I am? Because again, identity, oh my God, that matters. And if they're taking stock into things that are not fixed, things that could change, those things, if that's where their confidence is coming from, when that is taken away, it's going to be demolished. And so exploring means for them to actually find things that they can seek their identity in that is fixed, but also to encouraging them to find their voice outside of other people's opinion. And that has a lot to do with parenting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's strong. Hey, you're right. We could spend 3 or 4 webinars just on that. We got a question from Christy, who is asking, how do we handle totally resistant child, like a teen that is completely rebellious and doesn't want anything to do with counseling?
I think, again, finding them at their level of interest, right? So exploring things that maybe they are interested in, all right? But also to rolling with the resistance. And what you'll find is too, like sometimes when resistance is there, especially with adolescents, we're giving an emotional response. So let's talk about what resistance looks like in an adolescent and a small child. All right. So a small child resistance when they can't communicate looks like a temper tantrum. I'm throwing myself on the floor, right? I'm throwing things, right? And when we give them an emotional response, they will in turn interpret that as play. So they will do a lot more of that if we give an emotional response. It's the same with our adolescents. If you can roll with the resistance, find a way to probe, right? To keep it open, right? Or to affirm, I'm thinking of oars while I'm doing this, but finding a way to open the conversation instead of shutting it down, and also to not responding to the negative, because I find that is going down a rabbit hole. They have energy for days for that, and I think building up to treatment, building up to that point, if it's extremely bad, and I would say IV use, Xanax, just to name a few opiates, then you need to intervene, right? You need to be the bad guy and not wait for your kid to come to a level of insight and awareness that I need this. But then from there, once at the point of intervention, work on finding things that they are into. And again, guys, when your kid is really resistant, one of my professors would say, there is no resistant client. It's just what can I do as in therapist? Because honestly, if I'm saying that a client is resistant, honestly, I've just shut down. I've set a limit on what I can do as a therapist. I set a limit on my ability to reach the client and where they are. All right. So in saying that, as a parent, don't set down your limits. It's no point that your kid can push you away to. And if you've reached that point, it's okay for you to get someone involved. Again, reach out to the person that's your kid's person. So if that's an aunt or uncle, allow them to come in and provide those tough conversations, because your kid is possibly going to be more willing to talk to them because they already have a rapport. But don't set a limit. When the resistance is there, roll with it. And I find that even as a therapist, I'm more able to roll with the resistance when I'm looking at what the need is, when I'm looking at what the need is behind the behavior. So if you're hollering and you're screaming, but also too, sometimes too, just providing them a space to have an emotional outlet so that they don't have to adversely articulate those emotions through negative behavior.
Yeah, wow, that's good. And getting them in there, I think, is incredibly important, because I think that's where we can kind of deal with some of the resistance in a disarming type way. But also, I love what Latrice said about bringing somebody in. When a lot of times the person that's struggling wants to deal with it in isolation. And sometimes that might be the parent's tendency, because they don't want other people to know what the struggle might look like. But I encourage you to let safe people in, and that safe person for your teen also, aunt, uncle, coach, whoever that might be. But don't try to do it on your own. And don't even try to get them to counseling on your own, because you don't have to do it. There's probably somebody else that will walk that path with you. And if not, you call us and we'll figure out how to do it with you.
Absolutely.
We got a question from Denise. It says, with so much stigma around the topic of drugs, what type of language would you recommend parents using to not stigmatize the use of drugs by the child, to not stigmatize? Sorry, that was typed twice. So what would you recommend? What type of language do you recommend parents using to not stigmatize the use of drugs?
I would say, steering away from the word addict when talking to adolescents. I tend to use user, because I think that they find that less offensive, but also too the terminology that they use. So if they're talking about their drug use, The way that they refer to it is how I would then, because that's their language, they're comfortable with that language. So how they would, talk about it. But also too, I would just steer clear of any type of labels, generalized topic of drugs and substances. They probably say drugs, but I would steer away from any type of labels, right? Because again, when we're talking about identity, the moment that you put a label on it, you just link this to this is who I am. And again, they're still building that. So we don't want to put addict on an adolescent and have that be a part of their identity. And again, I think it's easy to steer clear of labels, stigma language when you're looking at the need and not and addressing, making the behavior separate from the person.
Absolutely. And that helps free them to discover their true, deeper identity that's not caught up in some bad decisions or something they've done on a whim.
John, that's so big what you said, because one of the things that I always try to reassure our clients is that this is just a bump in the road. I always talk it to them about in a place of where they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, where they know that this doesn't have to be their have all be all, where this doesn't have to be the narrative of who they are or their story. I think always talking about it too from a place of, something that depending on where they are, they may have to address long term, but also too separating it from their identity and who they are. Like, this is just a part of your story. This is something that you can get through and you can empower others to do. I think because sometimes the way you talk about it could be a way of hopelessness to the point that they don't see a solution for it. And so that's important too, in the language that you use when you're talking about addressing it and getting through it. And as John said, letting them know that it can't be done in isolation. And even you as a parent knowing that too, it's going to take a village. It's going to take more than one person. So.
Man, I feel like we need to put that on the national news, and we'll be voting for you for president in November. Well, that's all the questions that we have. If anybody else has any questions for follow-up, we're going to put up some ways that you can contact Latrice or me, or even Addiction Prevention Coalition. I'm trying to look through our notes real quick. Thank you all for this opportunity just to share some of our thoughts, and thank you for listening as well. We hope this has been an encouragement for you, and we want to give you more resources, and we want to get you to check out the UAB Beacon website, the Addiction Prevention Coalition website. You're welcome to check out Unbound Grace website as well. That's who I'm with. I think we're good. Carrie, anything else we need to do follow-up wise?
No, we're good. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, parents, for tuning in. And
absolutely
feeling discouraged, I just want to empower you to know that you guys took the first step today in getting your team help and opening up the conversation. Is being willing to listen and learn and know more about what's going on. That's a huge step. So pat yourselves on the back. And I just want to empower you to know that you can actually navigate through this conversation. You have the tools. And if you're listening to this, it's a level of openness that you already have to actually walk your kid through this process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Latrice. We appreciate your wisdom.
Thank you, John.
All right. See you guys later. Peace.